activate.
This is Living Power with Dan Hurst.
Now, we move into this story where Jesus is out and he is praying, and Judas and it's not an army, but it's Roman soldiers and temple guards and such all show up. Let's look at this passage. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" And they answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. So he asked them again, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken, "Of those whom you gave me, I have lost not one." Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me?" So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. Now, I want us to take a look first at the nature of trials and troubles, because when we understand, first of all, understand that there's a spiritual battle going on in our lives. Things that we don't understand, things that are happening to us that we can't really see. Sometimes we know that there's a spiritual battle, we sense that there's a spiritual battle going on, but we're always in a conflict of some sort that has spiritual implications, even when we don't even understand what it's all about. But troubles and trials come for different reasons into our life. Sometimes they're the result of our own choices, and sometimes they're the result of someone else's choice or someone else's sin. In Jesus' case, it was both. It was the result of man's sin, certainly Judas' sin, but man's sin in general. I mean, that was the whole reason that Jesus had come to earth. So part of what Jesus was going through was the result of man's sin, but it was also his choice. He chose to deliver us from that sin. So Jesus was suffering the trials and troubles that he was going through by his own choice, but also because of the sin of someone else. Sometimes those troubles and trials in our lives are just irritations and setbacks, and sometimes they're devastating and life-altering. But you have to face those issues in your life. And if you don't face them appropriately, the little ones can become the big things, and the big things can be overwhelming. So it's important to face those irritations and those trials and those troubles that you have to deal with on a daily basis and deal with them correctly, as well as face the big things that you have to face and may have to face some of those this year. So in this passage, we discover some key things that we need to remember about troubles and trials that come our way. And the first thing is that you are targeted by troubles and trials. I love how this passage really portrays that. It almost personifies trouble and trial for us. You know, it's like Judas is almost like the incarnation of evil, which he was not. Certainly that is Satan. But remember, the Bible says that Satan had entered him. So there was that. And Judas represents this idea that trouble sometimes are tools that are used to attack us. Irritations sometimes are just those tools. Sometimes the devil will use them. Sometimes they come because of our own choices. Sometimes they happen because other people are being abusive or not really being appropriate in their behavior toward us. In any case, we are sometimes targeted by troubles and trials. And these troubles and trials know where you are, it seems like. It's like you can't hide. You know, it's like you try to avoid them, they're going to find you. Jesus was in a place where Judas knew, but nobody else knew, that they could find him. Trouble seems to know where to find you. And some of you, he's done a pretty good job, or trouble, if it's a he or she, I don't know, but trouble has done a pretty good job of finding you and will continue to do so. Troubles and trials are going to find us. We can't get away from them. Troubles and trials often are accompanied by overwhelming odds. In this particular case, it says that Judas was accompanied by soldiers and by officers from the chief priests and Pharisees. So there were Roman soldiers with them as well as temple soldiers with them. So there was this whole contingent with Judas that was really, I mean, it was a formidable force. And so we sometimes are faced with overwhelming odds that come against us in the form of some troubles or trials. Troubles and trials intend to defeat you. That's the plan. When you're faced with a trouble isn't fulfilled, if you personify it, it isn't fulfilled until it has defeated you. The whole purpose of trouble is to cause trouble. And so if it can cause trouble and irritate you and make your life difficult, then trouble has succeeded. And if you understand that troubles and trials aren't just little passing things that you can ignore and they'll go away, it doesn't happen that way. Troubles themselves have to be dealt with and defeated. Otherwise, they will defeat you. That's the intent of troubles and trials. They intend to defeat you. I noticed the three things that John picked up on that the soldiers were carrying. They were carrying lanterns, torches, and weapons. The lanterns indicate this advantage of vision. And sometimes trouble has this advantage of being able to understand things in your life that you never understood before. Know right where to go, right where to find you, right where to get your goat. The torches represent the advantage of intimidation. Trouble intimidates. When we have troubles and trials in our lives, they intimidate us. And it's real easy to get so overwhelmed by the intimidation that the intimidation is bigger than the trouble itself, because we're afraid of the intimidation. The weapons represent the advantage of harm and defensiveness. The harm and defensiveness sometimes are the things that we're most afraid of. And really, let's face it, small troubles and trials don't necessarily have that. But the big troubles and trials do. And so we become so overwhelmed by the harm and the defensiveness of the weapons that we feel threatened, really, really threatened. And maybe perhaps that's the appropriate thing. We should be threatened. But trouble is going to attack, and it's going to come at us in ways that intimidate us and make us feel overwhelmed and feel inadequate, feel like we're not ready and not capable of handling this issue. You're going to be targeted by troubles and trials.